What if I told you that America's most loved president lived a secret life so shocking it would ruin any politician today? We're talking about John F. Kennedy, the man who won hearts with his charm. But behind closed doors he was making a bunch of secret love affairs that went into Hollywood, the White House workers, and even bad guys. His wife Jackie knew about every single one. She watched as her husband had business meetings that were really romantic dates. She smiled for cameras while women half her age were swimming with no clothes in the White House pool with her husband. One affair was so risky it almost destroyed the whole Kennedy presidency. But here's the crazy part. One woman he maybe dated ended up killed like a criminal just blocks from the White House. Her diary was burned by the CIA. Another said she was going to have the president's baby. And wait until you hear about the 19-year-old worker who lost her virginity to JFK in Jackie's own bedroom. By the end of this video, you'll understand why these weren't just casual dates. They were risky choices that could have brought down the most powerful man in the world. We're counting down every woman Kennedy maybe had an affair with. And number 3 will make you question everything about Camelot. This was the 1960s when newspapers protected politicians. Women had few choices and power meant getting away with almost anything. Kennedy wasn't just any president. He was young, really good-looking, with charm that drew people like bugs to light. Jackie wasn't some clueless wife living in make-believe. She was smart and planning, understanding exactly what her husband was doing. She once wrote that Jack was like her father, someone who loved chasing women but got bored after he caught them, needing constant proof he was still attractive. Why did she stay? Why put up with public embarrassment and private lies? The answer might shock you. But first, let's dive into the women who maybe shared close moments with America's most powerful man. Ellen Romick, the woman too dangerous to keep. Let's start with a name most people never heard, but one that sent shockwaves through government. Ellen Romick was a beautiful German woman who looked like Elizabeth Taylor. She wasn't just any rich lady. She was maybe a fancy call girl with access to Washington's most powerful men. Romesh was reportedly going to naked pool parties at the White House in spring 1963. But what made her truly dangerous wasn't her beauty or job. It was her background. She was German, married to a soldier in the German army, and the FBI thought she might be giving information to foreign spies. The situation became so serious that Robert Kennedy personally stepped in. He had Romick quietly sent away before she became a danger to the country. Think about that. The president's own brother had to cover up his affair because it threatened the whole country's safety. But Rome didn't go quietly. She knew secrets that could have destroyed not just JFK, but many high-ranking officials. Her sudden disappearance was so suspicious it caught newspaper reporters' attention. But the story was buried so deep it didn't come out until many years later. Gunilla von Post, the love that almost changed everything. Now we're entering territory that could have literally changed history. Gunilla von Post was a Swedish rich lady who claimed a 6-year relationship with Kennedy starting in 1953 when he was engaged to Jackie. But this wasn't just another fling. This apparently went much deeper. According to von Post's book, their first meeting on the French coast was like a romantic movie. She described Kennedy kissing her under moonlight, making his eyes appear bluer than the ocean. But here's the scary detail. This happened just 3 weeks before Kennedy was supposed to marry Jackie. What makes this explosive is what happened 2 years later. Von Post claims Kennedy actually told his father he wanted to leave Jackie to be with her. Imagine how different history would be if JFK had divorced Jackie for a Swedish rich lady. The political problems would have been terrible. But Joseph Kennedy Sr. stepped in and crushed those dreams, telling his son such scandal would destroy his political career. And here's proof this relationship was real. Love letters between Kennedy and von Post were sold in 2021, showing close details historians had never seen. One letter shows Kennedy begging von Post to visit, writing about their wonderful time together and how much he missed her. These weren't casual notes. They were desperate pleas of a man torn between love and ambition. Fiddle and Faddle, the White House secretaries. This is where Kennedy's affairs moved from risky to totally reckless. Priscilla Ware and Jill Cowan were White House workers who got security nicknames Fiddle and Faddle. These weren't code names to protect identities. They were making fun of their job performance because everyone knew they weren't there to answer phones or type letters. The most telling detail involves wet hair. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Ware and Cowan at their desks with soaking wet hair after skinny dipping with the president in the White House pool. Picture that. The leader of the free world splashing around naked with his secretaries while his wife was in another part of the building. But it gets more crazy. Ware regularly went with Kennedy on official trips to Berlin, Rome, Ireland, Costa Rica, Mexico, and Nassau. Former Secret Service agents reported she rarely seemed busy with official duties. Instead, she was basically Kennedy's travel friend, paid for by taxpayer money. What makes this particularly disturbing is how obvious it was. These weren't secret affairs in private locations. This was the president showing off cheating in America's most public building with workers supposedly working for the American people. And here's the detail showing Kennedy's arrogance. Jackie knew. During a White House tour with a Paris Match reporter, Jackie pointed to Ware's desk and commented in French, acknowledging this was the woman sleeping with her husband. Jackie had to put up with this embarrassment in her own home in front of foreign press. Marilyn Monroe. The affair that maybe never happened. Everyone remembers Monroe's sexy happy birthday. Mr. President at Madison Square Garden on May 19, 1962. Pure theater. Monroe taking off her fur coat to show a skin-tight rhinestone-covered dress, walking to the microphone with her signature breathy voice. The performance was so sensual, it immediately started romance rumors. But here's what most don't know. Kennedy and Monroe had very few opportunities to actually spend time together. Historians who studied their lives found that they may have been in the same place at the same time on only a few occasions. The most likely opportunity for close encounter was at Bing Crosby's Palm Springs home on March 24, 1962. Both were reportedly at a party there, and one of Monroe's friends claimed hearing what sounded like Kennedy's voice during a phone call with Monroe that weekend. But think about what this reveals. If Kennedy and Monroe had a relationship, it was probably a one-night stand blown completely out of proportion by decades of guessing. The idea of grand romance between America's president and Hollywood's biggest star is appealing, but reality was probably much more ordinary. What makes Monroe's story tragic isn't the maybe affair. It's what happened afterward. Less than 3 months after her birthday performance, Monroe was found dead from drug overdose. Exactly 1 year later, Kennedy was killed. The timing has fueled conspiracy theories for decades. Judith Campbell Exner, the mob connection. Now we're reaching affairs that didn't just threaten Kennedy's marriage, they threatened national security. Judith Campbell Exner claimed a relationship with Kennedy lasting several years. But what made her dangerous wasn't close knowledge of the president. It was her other relationships. Exner met Kennedy through Frank Sinatra at a concert, which should have been Kennedy's first warning. Sinatra was already known for questionable connections, but Kennedy was so confident in managing multiple relationships, he ignored obvious risks. What Kennedy apparently didn't realize was that Exner was at the same time involved with Sam Giannana, a famous mafia boss. Think about implications. The president sharing a mistress with organized crime. The potential for blackmail, leaked secrets, national security problems was huge. But Exner's claims go further. She says serving as go-between for Kennedy and Giannana, carrying messages and helping communication between the president and mafia. If true, Kennedy was using his mistress as a messenger for dealing with organized crime while supposedly leading the fight against it. The situation became so serious, FBI watching was involved. J. Edgar Hoover briefed Kennedy about watching, forcing the president to end the relationship, not because it was wrong, but because he'd been caught. But here's the detail showing Kennedy's recklessness. Exner claims she became pregnant with his child and had to get an abortion to protect his political career. If true, Kennedy was willing to end a potential life to keep his public image. Mary Pono Meyer, the murder that silenced secrets. We've reached the most disturbing story, not just because of the affair, but because of how it ended. Mary Poncho Meyer was an artist and rich lady who maybe had a 2-year close relationship with Kennedy. But what makes her story terrifying isn't what happened during their affair. It's what happened after Kennedy's killing. Meyer wasn't just another conquest. She was intelligent, educated, socially important, similar to Jackie, but with adventurous spirit that apparently fascinated the president. What set Meyer apart was her intellectual curiosity and her willingness to challenge Kennedy on political matters. She wasn't content to simply be another beautiful woman in his circle. She wanted to understand the complexities of power and policy that drove his decisions. According to sources, she became Kennedy's confidant, someone who spent mornings in the Oval Office discussing important matters. But these weren't just casual conversations about current events. Meyer was reportedly interested in Kennedy's thoughts on everything from civil rights to foreign policy, and she wasn't afraid to offer her own opinions. This intellectual closeness may have been even more dangerous than their physical relationship. Their relationship was serious enough that Meyer kept a diary writing down their time together. And here's where it becomes chilling. After Kennedy's killing, Meyer became increasingly vocal about doubts regarding the official story. She publicly stated she didn't believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, and she began asking uncomfortable questions about the circumstances surrounding the president's death. Meyer's doubt wasn't based on conspiracy theories or wild guessing. She had been close enough to Kennedy to understand the political forces at work, the enemies he had made, and the dangerous games being played at the highest levels of government. Her questions came from a place of close knowledge that made them particularly threatening to those who preferred the official story remain unquestioned. On October 12, 1964, just 2 days before her 44th birthday, Meyer took a routine walk along the Georgetown tow path. She was shot execution style in the head and heart. Her murder has never been solved despite occurring in broad daylight in one of Washington's most wealthy neighborhoods. But here's where it gets sinister. Immediately after Meyer's death, her best friend contacted Meyer's sister and Ben Bradlee, the Washington Post editor. The friend revealed Meyer had kept a diary that needed immediate securing, suggesting there was widespread knowledge that her writings contained sensitive information. What happened next reads like a spy thriller. The Bradlees rushed to Meyer's art studio only to find James Angleton, CIA's head of counterintelligence, already there with bolt cutters. The CIA was so concerned about Meyer's diary, they sent their top intelligence officer to get it before anyone else could see it. Think about the implications. The most powerful intelligence agency in America was breaking into a murder victim's private space to destroy evidence. The diary was eventually found, a notebook filled mostly with paint colors and sketches. But there were pages hinting at an affair with an unnamed lover and possibly more damaging revelations about what Meyer had learned during her time in Kennedy's inner circle. And here's the most chilling detail. Ben Bradlee chose to burn the notebook, destroying potential evidence that could have helped police investigation. The message was clear. Mary Pinchot Meyer knew too much and her knowledge died with her. Mimi Alford, the intern's shocking truth. If previous stories were disturbing, wait until you hear about Mimi Alford.